Hello, how for a day? I'm Major Neal Fisher, Deputy Officer in Charge and Public Affairs Officer for Marine Corps Activity Guam. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Island Palate. Today we've been invited to the beautiful village of Mangilao, where we're going to learn how to make a traditional island Christmas dessert. But it's not the island Christmas dessert you're probably thinking about. So join us as we experience something new. Come on. So we're in the lovely Mangilao home of Miss Jillian Summers. Ms. Summers, thank you so much for inviting us in to make this delicious Australian dish, not tomorrow dish, Australian Pavlova. And I know some of you thought we were going to make Banyela's dagu. Nope, Pavlova. Jillian, thank you.
Welcome. The garage door is open, so as they say in Australia, if the garage door's open, my car's there, come on in.
Well, we did come right in. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks for showing us how to make this dish.
Yes, and for any of the New Zealanders that might be watching, there's a bit of rivalry there. New Zealand claims that it was actually their invention for a ballerina called Pavlova. And I think it was actually a New Zealand chef that invented it, but I think it was cooked originally in Perth in Australia. But anyway, regardless of who made it, it's very yummy.
Well, the ingredient list that we saw really made our mouths water, and some of us have been fortunate enough to have tasted it. I have not, so I'm looking forward to making this dish so that I can have that experience as well. So Jillian, with that, let's go over some of the ingredients.
We'll be using 5 eggs, so it calls for 5 egg whites, 1 teaspoon of cornstarch per 2 egg whites, so roughly about 3 good heaped teaspoons of cornstarch, a teaspoon of vinegar, which will stabilise the meringue, and a 1.5 cups of caster sugar. This is just regular sugar that you buy at the shops, but we'll put it in the blender because to make a perfect meringue pavlova, you want the sugar to be fine, like sand.
Now, Jillian, you mentioned this is a meringue dish, and
yes,
you talked about separating the egg whites a little earlier.
Yes.
And there's a trick to doing that.
Yes, when you separate egg whites, it's always best, when you separate eggs to get egg whites, it's best to always have the eggs cold. And then after you've separated them, let the egg whites come down to room temperature. So let them sit there for about 10-15 minutes.
What's next?
You will start separating about 5 to 6 eggs. The best way to go about that is to always have one bowl to separate them in and then put your egg whites in there and then dump your egg whites either into that one or that one.
Let's give it a try.
You're a Marine. What are you scared of?
Hoorah. Oh, no yolk in the bowl. I got some yolk in the bowl. All right. But we can try again.
While the egg white comes down to room temperature, we're going to make our caster sugar. At 1.5 cups of caster sugar, you can lessen the sugar, depending on how sweet you want it, but you will need at least 1 cup of sugar to keep the meringue from like flopping. So when you pour that into the measuring jug now, you'll probably find that you've got more than 1 cup of sugar. Now you will put your room temperature egg whites. You can use a handheld mixer. It will just take twice as long.
Start slow.
Yep.
That is probably one of the most awesome things.
And you know, you did a really good job because already I can tell that there's absolutely no residue in your egg whites.
Thank you very much.
You're good for a Marine. All right, so now you go ahead and add your 3 heaped teaspoons of cornstarch.
Okay, 3 heaping teaspoons.
Teaspoon of white vinegar. And this will give the pavlova a nice sheen, and it will also help the pavlova to stay nice and firm.
Okay, so we're done with the blender. Next up, we're at the stove. Parchment paper.
Yes, I have my baking mat, which has a circle outline. But if you don't have something like that and you're just using parchment paper, you can get a plate and do an outline because you want to make it into a circle. Now this will make a pavlova that will probably serve 8 to 10 people, or you could also do 4 small pavlovas or 2 small ones, but we're just going to do 1 big shell.
Okay. How am I doing, Jillian?
You're doing good, and you know, you can be really fancy and form nice little peaks all around, but honestly, depending on the day and the eggs, you know, when it goes into the oven, it will still probably crack up a little bit. And I think sometimes the more homely it looks, the better it tastes. And we're going to cook this for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Okay, so into a 250, 260 oven, depending on how hot your oven runs. Magic looks like.
Wow, that looks great.
And again, you can leave this for up to 24 hours. Just make sure you store it in an airtight container.
We've done with our baking. We've let it cool. We're not under any AC.
We're not under AC.
And now
We're hungry though.
We are, and I can't wait to taste this. But we have one final set of ingredients and they look delicious.
Today we're going to use blueberries, raspberries, kiwi fruit, and passion fruit. Chantilly cream, which is just whipping cream that's been sweetened with icing sugar and a good dash of vanilla essence. Now you can decorate and you can do anything you want.
Here's 2. Okay. One thing I've held off on saying so far during this episode of Island Palate is inviting the viewers to write their congressman, because we're almost 2015 and there's no smell-o-vision. Now we need to go into some form of taste through television, and I don't know how we can figure that out. There's smarter people out there than me, but you really have to try pavlova. If you haven't had the opportunity, make an Australian friend, beg them, pay them, whatever, because the tastes are just amazing. The raspberry, the blueberries, the fluffiness, that's this entire confection is just amazing. Thanks again, Jillian. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Island Palate. Join us next time as we continue to travel the island, meeting great people in great new places and learning some of these great recipes. Adios, Guam.